Quick note before we start. This video is for education and entertainment, and it's built on a genuinely alarming stack of research. Alright, let's dig. Here's a fact that sounds like it must be wrong, but isn't. The human brain has been shrinking. Over roughly the last 10 to 20,000 years, the average size of the human brain has actually gotten smaller. Not bigger, smaller. Your ancestors, the so-called cavemen, walked around with brains that were, on average, somewhat larger than yours, and nobody is entirely sure why. This is one of the strangest and least talked about facts in human evolution. The possible explanations range from mildly humbling to genuinely mind-bending. When you measure the internal volume of human skulls across time, the trend is real. A reduction that some researchers have compared to losing a chunk roughly the size of a tennis ball. For a species obsessed with its own intelligence, this is a plot twist. The graph went up, and then it dipped. Before anyone panics, this does not straightforwardly mean we're getting dumber. Brain size and intelligence are not a simple one-to-one relationship. Raw volume isn't the whole story. Neanderthals had brains as large as or larger than ours. Elephants and whales have brains vastly bigger, and none of that makes them smarter. What matters enormously is how a brain is organized, wired, and folded. The internal architecture, not just the bulk. A smaller brain is not automatically a worse brain. It might be more efficient, but it's still a puzzle. For millions of years, the trend was toward bigger, and then it reversed. The entire popular image of human evolution is built on the opposite idea. Picture the classic diagram, hunched ape to upright modern human. Baked into that image is the assumption that our brains just kept inflating right up to today. For most of the story, the brain growth part is true. Over millions of years, hominin brains roughly tripled in size, but right at the end, in the most recent chapter, the trend quietly reverses. The graph turns down, and almost nobody mentions it, because it doesn't fit the triumphant story we like to tell about ourselves. That's exactly why it's worth talking about. Let's go through the leading ideas. The first, body size. Brain size tracks. Body size, to some degree. Human bodies got somewhat smaller after the Ice Age, possibly linked to diet changes and agriculture. If the body shrank, the brain might have shrunk right along with it. Just proportional scaling. This is the deflationary explanation. Nothing dramatic. It probably accounts for part of it, but not all. The second explanation, efficiency. Maybe our brains got smaller because they got better organised. The brain burns about a fifth of your entire energy budget at rest. That's a massive metabolic cost. Any way to trim that cost while keeping the cognitive payoff would be strongly favoured by natural selection. Under this idea, the shrinking brain isn't a downgrade. It's an optimization. We streamlined. The brain wasn't only changing size, it was being reorganized. Our brain case became rounder and more globular. A reorganized brain can do more with less, the way a well-designed engine outperforms a bigger, clumsier one. The third explanation is where it gets mind-bending. Our brains got smaller because we started outsourcing them. Think about what changed in the last 10 to 20,000 years. Humans went from small bands to larger, denser, more connected societies. In a big society, no single individual has to know everything. Knowledge can be distributed across many minds, eventually stored outside the brain entirely, in traditions, specialists, social institutions, and later in writing. You don't need to personally remember everything if the group collectively holds that knowledge. The pressure on each individual brain to be a giant knowledge bank relaxed. We could afford smaller brains because we were thinking together. Our intelligence became partly a group property, held in the network rather than in each skull. Under this view, the brain shrank not because we got dumber, but because we got more social, more connected. We externalized part of our minds into our culture. The internet is just the latest version of something that started long ago, humans offloading memory into the world. Your smartphone holding your phone numbers and directions. That's the newest chapter in a very old story of the brain outsourcing itself. There's a fourth explanation, and it connects us to dogs. When humans domesticate an animal, the domesticated version almost always ends up with a smaller brain than its wild ancestor. A dog's brain is smaller than a wolf's. This seems linked to selecting for tameness, for reduced aggression. Some researchers argue that humans effectively domesticated ourselves. As we built cooperative societies, the tolerant individuals thrived. We may have been unconsciously selecting our own species for tameness, generation after generation, the way we selected dogs. If self-domestication is real, our shrinking brains might be a side effect of us becoming gentler, more social creatures. Under this idea, we are the domesticated ape. We tamed ourselves and the smaller brain came along for the ride, just like it did for the dog dozing at your feet. Now the honest part. Not everyone agrees the shrinkage is as clean as the headlines suggest. Some researchers have pushed back, arguing the timing and magnitude are messier than the simplest story implies. There was a well-known recent study proposing a specific timeline that then drew serious criticism. What's solid is that human brains today are not larger than those of our Ice Age ancestors, and quite likely somewhat smaller. Why, exactly, and by precisely how much? Those are live scientific questions, not settled facts. That uncertainty isn't a weakness, it's the honest state of the science. But here's the real lesson, regardless of which explanation wins. We tend to tell human evolution as a straight march of improvement, up and up, bigger brains, endless progress. With us, at the glorious summit, the shrinking brain is a beautiful rebuke to that arrogance. Evolution is not a ladder climbing toward us. It's a messy, branching, meandering process with no goal and no summit that will happily shrink a brain if a smaller one works better in the moment. We are not the inevitable peak of anything. We're just the current state of a process that's still going. Still tinkering, still changing us in ways we barely notice. Your slightly smaller brain is a quiet reminder that evolution didn't stop when humans showed up. It's still happening right now. And there's something almost comforting in it. If our brains shrank while our capabilities exploded, cities, science, art, machines on other planets, then it was never really about the size of any one head. It was about what we could do together. The story of humanity was never the story of the biggest brain in the room. It was the story of a lot of brains, of every size, thinking as one. So the next time someone tells you humans are the pinnacle of evolution, tell them a stranger truth. Our brains are smaller than our cave-dwelling ancestors. Nobody's totally sure why. And it might be because we got so good at thinking together. Evolution is still writing our story. And it clearly didn't read the flattering version we told about ourselves. All the sources are in the description. The cranial capacity data, the efficiency and outsourcing hypotheses, and the critiques. Go read them and enjoy watching scientists openly argue about the size of your own head. And remember, those big-brained ancestors are your family, and you're carrying their story forward in a slightly smaller skull. So stay curious, keep thinking together, and keep digging. See you in the next one. Bye. The exact numbers get debated, but a rough sense is a reduction some compare to losing a tennis ball-sized chunk. For a species obsessed with its own intelligence, whose story is usually told as brains getting bigger and bigger, this is a plot twist. The uncomfortable facts are usually the most interesting ones. Remember from our farming video that early farmers often got shorter and less robust as their diets narrowed. A smaller, more tightly wired, more efficient brain would be cheaper to run. The brain's shape has shifted. Our brain case became rounder and more globular compared to earlier relatives. Size, on its own, was never the point. The theory goes that once we could store and share information across a society, pressure on each brain relaxed. Our intelligence became partly a group property, held in the network rather than in each skull. Along with gentler temperament come a whole suite of physical changes, including a smaller brain. The hot-headed and violent were increasingly pushed out. We may have been selecting ourselves for tameness. We are, in a very real sense, the domesticated ape. Evolution is not a ladder climbing toward us. It's a messy, branching, meandering process with no goal. Your slightly smaller brain is a quiet reminder that evolution didn't stop when humans showed up. If our brains shrank while our capabilities exploded, it was never about the size of any one head. It was about what we could do together. A lot of brains of every size thinking as one. Nobody's totally sure why our brains shrank, and it might be because we got so good at thinking together that we didn't need to carry as much alone. Evolution is still writing our story, and it clearly didn't read the flattering version we told about ourselves. Scientists openly argue about the size of your own head. It's the messiness working exactly as it should. Those big-brained ancestors are your family. You're carrying their story forward in a slightly smaller skull. Stay curious, keep thinking together, and keep digging. See you in the next one. Bye!